Shortly after I graduated from medical school, Dr. Mendelsohn asked me to come work with him. And so I started working with him. He was in charge of one of the Head Start programs here in Chicago. It was a very part-time job, but I opened my own practice. And our first baby was born in the hospital. And my wife said she wasn't doing that again. And when someone asked her, which part aren't you doing? She said, most probably both parts. No more children, no more hospital. And Dr. Mendelsohn sent me to Dr. Gregory White, who'd been delivering babies at home for 25 years. And after I started working with her, I said, oh my God, this is sensational. And our second baby was born at home, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 12 of our 13 grandchildren have been born at home. And it was I started delivering babies with Dr. White, mainly at home. And slowly but surely, I never really talked very much about vaccines. I never talked about what my family was doing. But slowly but surely, the women who were having babies at home and nursing their children were the ones who was most interested about vaccines. And so essentially my practice started becoming more and more unvaccinated. Now, the number of vaccines given in the 70s was minuscule compared to today. And I stopped giving vaccines well over 30 years ago because in all good consciousness, I just couldn't give it no matter what. But my partners, and I had 3 partners who we worked for more than 25 years together, even though none of their children were vaccinated, felt that we should leave the choice to families. So no one was ever pressured to have vaccines in our practice. I could say as time went on, by the 80s, it was less than 10%. By the 90s, it was less than 5%. And now that I have a small practice with my daughter, as my other partners retired or opened their own practice, no one's vaccinated. And so we looked at the numbers, and we have approximately 50,000 unvaccinated children in the practice. And now, of course, I don't have data on all of them because many of them moved away. But over the school year, and during the summer when we do the school physicals, I now ask every parent, how come I haven't seen you for 2 years or 3 years? And he said, where else have you been going? What do you mean, Dr. Eisenstein? I'm not going anywhere else. My kids have never been sick. And that's almost over and over again. You hear the same thing. No vaccines, never sick. When I use the word never, virtually never. But it's not only seeing neurological problems, not seeing like autism, the amount of asthma almost non-existent. And I told this to Dan 9 years ago that Blue Cross had called me in. And they said to me, Dr. Eisenstein, we have over 1,000 children in your HMO panel. I'm now the medical director for the alternative medicine group here in Chicago. But 9 years ago, we had about 1,000 children in the panel. And you only have 1 case of asthma out of 1,000 children. And they said, how is this possible? And so I said, there were 2 nurses, 2 doctors there at the meeting. I said, I'm a very good doctor. And he said, well, we believe you that, but I said, but none of these children are vaccinated. I said, oh my God, you've got to be kidding. So I said, Dr. Eisenstein, do you think we don't know who you are? We're on your website. We know that you talk about the dangers of vaccines. And they couldn't get over this. It blew them away. But they said, we're not in the business of practicing medicine, and we just wanted to know if there's something else that you were doing. The rate with Blue Cross was running 15%, which means they would have expected to see 150 cases of asthma. And this may be the strongest evidence, the asthma evidence, the bronchitis, the ear infections, the juvenile diabetes, the respiratory infections, which virtually don't exist in our practice. Virtually don't exist. Last winter, we had the coldest winter in the Midwest in, my God, 40 years. And we had 4 ear infections in the practice all winter long. 4, of which 3 were not even treated with antibiotics. I looked at, and we figured out we had about 6,000 children under 6 years of age. 1 child treated for ear infection out of 6,000. They say that in a practice, you would expect to treat 1 out of every 5 children for ear infection, which means we should have seen over 1,000. The numbers aren't a component of twice, 3 times, 5 times. It's so unbelievably low that it almost doesn't look real. It reminds me when I was delivering babies at home, And the incidence of episiotomy, which was a big deal of women trying not to do it at home, was less than 1%. In the hospital, it was running 50%, 75%, 80%. The cesarean section rate at home was about 3 to 4%. The same as one of my late mentors, Dr. Beatrice Tucker, the first woman obstetrician in the country, who was delivering babies at home for 50 years when I met her back in the early 70s. And this was mind-boggling. She wrote the same paper 75 years ago talking about the low rate of cesarean section among a poor income families that she was taking care of at the Chicago Maternity Center. And so I think we're seeing numbers that are astronomical. It's almost like unbelievable, to the point that it doesn't become believable until you talk to the families of unvaccinated children and you find out their children are virtually never sick.